Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the 1990s, the last great decade. And when you talk about the 1990s, you have to talk about the man whose presidency lasted the majority of that decade. We're talking about, of course, Bill Clinton. Before we can get to the Bill Clinton presidency, let's talk about the election of 1992, where it all started. The election of 1992 is one of my favorite elections, not only because it's the first one that I can remember, but because the characters involved are so wonderful. You've got the incumbent president, Republican George Herbert Walker Bush, straight laced, serious guy, incredibly impressive foreign policy achievements. But during this election, he is hampered by a sluggish economy, a recession, and of course, he's made a lot of the conservative wing of his party upset because he broke his pledge, his promise that he made in 1988 not to raise taxes. On the other side, you've got the Democrat, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. Clinton is a middle of the road centrist Democrat who governs by consensus. He is a natural politician. He is, in many ways, the first modern uh, politician of the modern incarnation of politicians. He goes on late night talk shows, plays the saxophone, tries to be very relatable, appeal to young voters. Um, but he, of course, is hampered by accusations of corruption while a governor of Arkansas, but also about sexual misconduct. And that those accusations are going to haunt him the remainder of his political career. And then you have got an independent candidate, H. Ross Perot. He is a billionaire from Texas who is very concerned about the growing deficits that the country is experiencing. And he really appeals to fiscal conservatives. And he is going to do incredibly well by the standards that we set for third party candidates. He's going to get 18.8% of the popular vote. That is incredibly impressive. 19 million plus votes, nearly 20 million votes. Doesn't win any states, but still has a major impact on the election. Why? Because of his fiscally conservative credentials, most of the people that he appeals to probably would have supported the Republican President Bush. But they don't. They go to him. What does that do? That helps pave the way for Clinton. Bill Clinton, you can see, is going to get just under 43% of the popular vote. But that's okay because by razor thin margins in all of these states, he's going to win the Electoral College in a landslide. So Clinton's presidency has a lot going on, and we don't have time to go through all of it today, but we are going to hit a few of the highlights, the highs and the lows for the Clinton presidency. Let's start out with one of the lows, and that is his efforts to reform healthcare. Always a touchy subject. Anytime any president tries to mess with healthcare, it's going to be a fight. In this case, Clinton is going to put his first lady, his wife, Hillary Clinton, in charge of this. Now, Hillary Clinton, extremely accomplished in her own right, of course, has gone on in years after this to be a senator and secretary of state and to be a nominee for president. But at this time, it was just so strange to so many people to see a first lady in this kind of a role. But Clinton and Hillary are very much partners in all that they do, and to him, it was a natural thing. Hillary is going to advocate; she's going to headline this healthcare reform effort. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be heavily lobbied against by the insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and all these sort of things, the same kind of organizations and lobbying that always comes out anytime healthcare is mentioned. And it's never even going to be voted on by Congress. So certainly a major defeat for the Clinton administration. One that was not was the Brady Bill. The Brady Bill was a law signed to address gun violence in our country. What it did is it required a waiting period before someone could complete a firearm purchase. And then later that turns into it's going to require a background check when you buy a firearm from a licensed gun dealer. To date, the Brady Bill and the regulations it put in place has kept millions of guns out of the hands of many people who could not pass those background checks. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, depending on where you sit, is either a great success or a failure. What it did is it eliminated trade restrictions between the partner nations of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, North America. Critics are going to argue that by doing away with these trade agreements or doing away with trade restrictions, that manufacturing jobs are going to go to places like Mexico that has lower wages. They're right. Proponents are going to argue that NAFTA is going to lead to more goods on American shelves and lower prices for Americans. They're right too. So there's good and bad aspects, but as far as getting the trade agreement signed, it's a win for the Clinton administration. Welfare reform is another thing. This is something where Clinton is going to show his ability to govern through compromise with at that time, a Republican-controlled Congress. It's designed to move Americans off of welfare and toward jobs, and it does that. Even though it's criticized by the liberal wing of the Democratic Party, it, of course, is aided by the fact that throughout the 1990s, the economy is booming. And that always makes it easier for people to find jobs. Speaking of a booming economy, that's going to help lead to a balanced budget. Compromise with the Republicans regarding taxes and spending cuts is going to lead to a balanced federal budget. Increased tax revenue because more people are working because the economy is so good, plus some spending cuts is going to lead to a federal surplus. The government is bringing in more money than it is spending. This is something that is unimaginable in today's climate. Foreign policy, Clinton is fortunate that he does not have a major war that has to deal with. And when we talk about presidents, we often talk about the wars that they're involved with: the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. But there's peace around the world between the major countries at this time. That being said, the world is far from peaceful. Clinton he comes into office in the aftermath of the Cold War, and he's trying to maintain peace with Russia and work with them to move forward. The Soviet Union, of course, is gone. He's going to use American forces around the world in a variety of humanitarian efforts, lending American forces together with NATO to halt ethnic conflicts in Bosnia and Kosovo. He's going to use the United States as a negotiating tool between Israel and Palestine to try to bring some sort of peace to that troubled region, but far from long-lasting peace. He's going to have a lot less success in Africa. Somalia would be a good example of this. Somalia was a country that American forces had been in for a while as a result of a civil war and a terrible, terrible famine. And when some American troops are killed in Somalia and the chaos surrounding that is captured on TV, it probably creates a little bit of a less than enthusiastic response for the United States public for getting involved around the world. And maybe that contributes to the fact that when in Rwanda there was a terrible, terrible, terrible genocide, that the United States does not intervene quickly to try to do anything about that. So certainly in Africa, not a whole lot of foreign policy success. The 1990s is characterized by increased partisanship that had not, certainly far more than had been around in the years leading up to it. The 1994 midterm elections are a good example of that. This handsome man, this is Newt Gingrich, the congressman from Georgia. He is going to headline something called the Contract with America, which is a series of policy proposals to try to reinvigorate the Reagan Revolution, the conservative revolution. And this platform of policies is going to help lead to the Republicans winning control of both houses of Congress in 1994 for the first time in a long time. What does Clinton have to do? Clinton has to move to the political center. He has to govern by compromise. He has to work with the Republicans. And this is where you're going to see actually a lot of legislation get passed. But one problem is going to be the budget negotiations between Clinton and the GOP-led Congress. He is not going to give in to entitlement cuts that some of the GOP wanted to do. What's that lead to? That leads to a government shutdown where all the employees of the federal government have to go home. And this is not good. And lucky for Clinton, most of the public are going to blame the Republicans. They're not going to blame him. And eventually they get a budget deal. He's going to be easily reelected in 1996. Why? Because the economy is booming and because of some significant legislative achievements. Plus, the Republicans are not going to run exactly an enthusiastic candidate. That's going to be Senator Bob Dole. Senator Bob Dole is a World War II veteran. He's widely respected, but not exactly the most charismatic of individuals. If you've heard anything about Bill Clinton, it's probably that he was impeached. So let's talk about that. In 1998 and 1999, this mess happens. It's a very complicated thing. We don't have time to go through all the ins and outs of it, but let's talk about the basics. He is under investigation. The Clintons are under investigation because of alleged misconduct by them regarding an Arkansas real estate deal when he was the governor of Arkansas. At the same time, there's a sexual harassment lawsuit by a former Arkansas state employee named Paula Jones. And during the investigation of that lawsuit, it is revealed that Clinton had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, a White House intern. At the same time, while under oath for his other investigation, he was asked about this affair and he lied about it. He's accused of lying, well, he did lie, about the nature of their relationship. If you lie under oath, that's not okay. Some might even call it perjury, and that is why he is going to be impeached. The House of Representatives is going to impeach Bill Clinton for perjury, lying under oath, and obstruction of justice, interfering with an investigation. The public is very much divided on this issue. There was next to zero chance that President Clinton would be removed from office, but nevertheless, he is impeached along partisan lines. Of course, if you're impeached, then you have to go to trial in the Senate, and the Senate must find you guilty by a two-thirds majority in order to remove you from office, and that doesn't happen. Nowhere near what is required. Again, along partisan lines, with actually a few Republicans coming to join the Democrats, he is acquitted. But of course, he has this impeachment that will always haunt his presidency. Let's talk about more lasting things. The economy during the 1990s was booming. Millions of new jobs were created, but of course, not all of those are great jobs. Unemployment rate is very, very low, but many people are working lower paying or part-time or temporary jobs. Many companies, trying to be more efficient, are transitioning to computer-driven robots. They're also downsizing, that sort of stuff. We're going to see a loss of industrial jobs, manufacturing jobs. Many of them affected by globalization are going to move overseas, which leads to a drop in union membership, thereby bringing less security to the workplace. The booming economy is in part fueled by high-tech industries. The internet, this newfangled thing that made a bunch of people millionaires in the 1990s. It also made people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Michael Dell household names. High-tech companies that were called dot-coms are popping up left and right, making all sorts of money. But by the end of the decade, as we move into the new millennium, many of these dot-com companies are going to not be profitable, and that dot-com bubble is going to burst. But during the 90s, there was lots of money to be made. So we've got economic changes. We also have these other challenges. I mentioned earlier that there is peace in the world between major countries, but there's certainly a lot of violence in the world. And terrorism is going to affect the United States all throughout the 1990s. Around the world, American service people and diplomats are going to be target of terrorist attacks throughout the world. But right here at home, there's going to be terrorism as well. In 1993, terrorists affiliated with Al-Qaeda are going to bomb the World Trade Center, the same place that later would be attacked on September the 11th. 2 years later, some homegrown terrorists, some anti-government radicals, blow up a federal building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people. The next year at the Summer Olympics, which was hosted in Atlanta, an anti-gay, anti-abortion radical is going to set a bomb there at the Olympic Park. And then, of course, in 1999, there is the infamous case where two students at Columbine High School are going to kill 13 and wound 23 as they shot up Columbine High School, ushering in an era of school shooting that we live with today. The legacy of the 1990s is economic prosperity, cultural change, peace with other nations, but it's also characterized by increased partisanship, the growth of cable news, CNN, Fox News, and others. The new concerns for the new millennium are globalization, outsourcing of jobs, terrorism, and gun violence. And we live with that legacy today.